Welcome to the WanderLearn Show. I'm your host, Tapon. In this episode, I interview the CEO and founder of a new app that's called Kommu. It's Kommu. And what it is, it's kind of a blend of like Airbnb, Trusted House Sitters, and Couchsurfing all in one. How it works is that you pay an annual membership fee of about $300 or so, and you have an option then to stay at places at cost. So for example, let's say you have an apartment that costs $3,000 a month. You can get it for $100 a day. And that is a pretty good deal, especially in places that have a lot of Airbnbs that tend to mark things up, right? And that same apartment on Airbnb might cost 3 times as much. So you can end up saving a lot of money as a traveler. And you can also use it as a way to find out your friends who are in the network. So for example, you might go to Paris and find out, who are my friends in Paris? And do they happen to be at home? Do they have their home available? So we dive into the ins and outs of the app. We're going to go dive into the nuts and bolts of what Kommu is, how it differentiates from the other options out there, and why people should and should not use it. So welcome, Bo.
Thanks for having me, Francis. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. So let's start off with the first thing. Like, since you're the founder and CEO, what motivated you? Most founders, CEOs, they have a pain point.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what happened is that I had an experience where, I was trying to go to business school to work in venture capital to get on track with my career. And I had spent all the money I had trying to get into the top business schools because I wanted to go there. And so I took the GMAT, the entrance exam for business school 7 times. I paid for the tutors. I paid for the consultants. Because I had such a bad experience coming out of undergrad to try to initially get into college. I'm like, I'm not losing to the rich kids this time. So all of my savings, all of my retirement went into that. I think I invested $20,000-$30,000 into that whole process, applied to 9 schools. And basically I was supposed to go back east for business school. So was my co-founder. We're both from LA originally. And then COVID hit. So of course, all that work and it's COVID business school. We both decided to apply to UCLA. He got a perfect score in the GMAT the first time, so he got a full ride. I got a half scholarship, so that was, incentivizing to stay local, stay close to my family, and be in LA. And that's all to say, I worked so hard, and I decided to go to Montana to clear my head after, really working my butt off. And 4 nights at a crappy Airbnb in Montana was half my rent for the month in LA. And that's where the problem started. I remember we used Turo while we were out there, which is, a peer-to-peer car rental service. And I'm like, man, not only is this short-term rental, this Airbnb, it's much more expensive than I can afford right now as a guest. But on top of that, my most expensive asset, my home in LA, has to sit empty and unused while I'm away. And it's because I can't list on short-term rental sites as a renter. Nor can I afford short-term rentals now as a guest. So that was where I was like, why can't I do this with my home? Like, why the person that needs this the most, that has a financial motivation, isn't being solved for in the market? And so that was the origin story where the wheels started turning. I met my co-founder at business school, and we were talking about this a little bit. We were like, both remote capable workers before the pandemic untethered that for 100 million plus Americans, and we're like, man, we did not travel at all, even with that opportunity to do so, because we couldn't afford it. And we had pretty decently paying jobs. So we imagined that might be a big problem for a lot of people. And that's where we discovered that it's actually a massive problem for millennials and Gen Zers that now want to work and live in other places without giving up, their homes in these core key locations. And that's where Kommu was born.
Got it. Okay. So then tell us a little bit more about the nuanced differences, because there are some nuances between. People are listening to this and saying, okay, well, why didn't you just do Airbnb? Airbnb started with the idea of renting out a couch in San Francisco. And why couldn't you as a tenant rent out your couch using Airbnb?
Yeah, so that's really what this is all about. It's going back to essentially where Airbnb started and saying that this moment in time is what is unlocking that opportunity that Airbnb sort of pivoted away from. And really what Airbnb did is it evolved into more of a professionalized platform. Over 60% of hosts now are investment management companies. They are motivated to list for a profit, which is most marketplaces, right? Most marketplaces exist for suppliers to maximize profit off of guests. And in our case, we're saying, well, if you build a social network and a social graph of all of the places available to you with and through your trusted network, so that's maybe sharing your home for free with friends and gifting it and letting them know when it's available. It might be subletting to a friend of a friend, or swapping, or pet or house sitting. Like a good example right now would be I'm in New York for 3 weeks. I'm pet sitting on Kommu from the pet sitting group. So I'm staying in a luxury building for free. And I have a friend of a friend paying my rent back home in LA. So I'm actually making money essentially to be in New York right now for 3 weeks. But that's all to say that relationship or those relationships, that social graph is what unlocks this entire opportunity basically for an entire segment and generation of users that cannot list their homes on platforms like Airbnb. They have been turning to Instagram and WhatsApp and texting friends and whatever to try to find a solution to that problem. And we're like, well, we're going to build a network for that where there's no transaction fees. It's more of a Costco model where you pay a small annual subscription, and we make sure people are not listing their homes for profit. We verify their identities. We facilitate transactions on the platform, but that's a consumer empowerment tool. Airbnb is really now for professionalized hosts and managers.
Okay, but Bo, a lot of people in the WanderLearn audience are not well connected people. They've got their 5 friends. They're not on social media, and it seems that they might be hearing this and saying, "Well, there's a lot of premise here that the more well connected, the more places you have to stay, and that kind of stuff. The more people who can stay at your place, that kind of stuff." How would you address that concern for people who are kind of hermits?
Yeah, I mean, I will say, a lot of the initial, genesis of Kommu would have been that it was this, that like we would want users on that had a network already there. You kind of needed that network effect. And there was a lot of friction there, right? A lot of people were like, not only do I not maybe have connections on the platform already, but I'm not going to necessarily go out and invite people to this platform where I'm not seeing value in and of itself. And so that was where we flipped it. And we realized that if we started as an open network, that we essentially, would give anybody the experience of seeing the value of Kommu, even as a sort of fee-free version of Airbnb, with where you could actually see if you have connections to these hosts. And then we would encourage people to join groups, to add friends, to find more value over time. So you could download Kommu today. Anybody can. They would see 150 plus hosts like me listing to all of Kommu that are essentially financially motivated, but they're still listing for way more affordable rates than on these other different platforms for professionalized managers. And then we'd say, by the way, you can join these public groups. You can apply to join these private groups. You can add your friends. And the more people you add and connect with, the more value you get. But if you want to use us as an open network too, that's everybody's experience to start.
Okay. So for right now, people listening to this are probably still pretty confused, and they're trying to figure out, what is this? How do I use it? So I think what might help now, Bo, is to cite at least 2 different examples. So one, when you're trying to look for a place to stay in, I don't know, New York or Florida, versus doing something with your house. So let's start with step 1. I want to go to, let's say, Miami. So
Okay.
how do I use Kommu? Okay.
You download Kommu in the App Store. Right now, it's only in the App Store. So we're working on Android. It's only mobile for a reason.
What's the ETA for the mobile app in Android?
Anywhere from 1 to 5 months. Obviously, a lot of that is contingent on what we want to get to a certain amount of scale on this one before building.
So sometime in 2024.
Yes, Android will be out there.
So let's just say later to 2024. I'd rather say Christmas 2024. Keep you safe.
Yeah, I mean, again, they're asking for it. We're trying to build it as fast as possible. If we can hire more talent faster, we'll build it faster. But that's on us.
Totally understand. Okay, so now I got the app.
Yeah.
And now what?
Just go to my.
And then, by the way, it's app only. It's not a website.
Yes, it is. It is app only to start for now. It's because you're verified through your phone number. That's how we know you're the real Francis.
Got it.
And then obviously it's like being able to notify you about all these trips that are becoming available to you in your network. But yeah, let's say you're going to Miami. You go download Kommu, open it up, search Miami. You will see hosts that are listing publicly in Miami. You click on their profile, you'd see dates it's available, how they're listing their home. So in this case, you would see that they're listing to all of Kommu and then all these other options that they have, whether that's just friends or friends of friends or groups. So you'd see that these are public hosts. And then you could send them a booking request and see if they'd be, open to having you for what would probably amount to anywhere between $80 to $100 a night in most of these, major cities, which is still significantly more affordable than short-term rental. And then from there, we would encourage you to take more actions to get more value out of the app.
Okay, and then what kind of accommodations could I expect? Sleeping on the floor, couch, or actual bed, private room, or all the above?
Most of our bookings are studios or 1 bedrooms or 2 bedrooms, where you would have the entire place to yourself.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
One of the co-founders of Couchsurfing is an investor in Kommu, and we know that market and community very well, and that was definitely an amazing thing. But was a little too open. You didn't feel that sense of privacy necessarily, that your friends can provide, those trusted networks can provide. And then obviously Airbnb's on the other side of that, of being very professionalized and very expensive. And we, as you kind of mentioned in the intro, toe that line of giving you either experience you want, but ultimately also, we can give you an experience where you're just sharing your home with your 10 closest friends for free, and there's utility there, but that's really on the extremes.
I'll probably get a studio or one bedroom, most likely. I'm probably not going to get, what if I wanted like a house and I want to invite like my family with my 5 children or whatever?
You could totally do that. Okay. And that's the beauty of Kommu over time. So what's amazing about being social is that anybody can build essentially their own bespoke network on Kommu and use it in a variety of ways, right? Your friends, if you are a person that has a family with children of a certain age, are probably people that are similar in that manner, right? They probably have houses and they're around the world and they have children. And so again, that's why we're encouraging you to then add them on Kommu, to invite them, and then to theoretically join groups over time that might be geared more towards parents with young children. In the meantime, our core users are really people like me that are 24 to 35-year-olds that cannot afford to travel and leave their places vacant. That's like why we're starting with that market, because they have a need. There are other competitors in the market that are more bigger homes and like families oriented, but we think they're missing the need and they're just kind of going towards a higher class of user, which is great. It's a great go-to-market strategy, but we're sort of solving to start with the people like me.
Okay, so let's look at the logistics now. Let's say I picked 5 nights in Miami, $100 a night. That's $500. How do I pay the owner?
So right now you would be paying directly peer-to-peer via Venmo or a PayPal. That's what we're closing this round out for, is to actually be able to facilitate payment on the platform.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah. Because I remember reading on your website, it says that you have to deal directly with the owner. And that's fine. Just what about if the owner is, let's say, vacation? Because presumably this is the owner's home,
Primary
right? So
home,
he's got his clothes and stuff like that, his primary home. And so he might be vacationing in France for a week, and then he can rent out his place for $500 for 5 nights in Miami. And so you would have to Venmo him. How did the logistics of getting the keys? Somehow you have to all work that out because he's not there.
Yeah.
Right.
And in time, again, a lot of those, I would say even the key handoff is one of the trickiest things about this type of marketplace, but it's totally doable. Like I leave my keys in a lockbox with a code that I provide to a guest once I accept them on Kommu. There's other services that we definitely can implement in time, and we look forward to doing that with key handoff. But at the end of the day, the logistics are more about payment and then dates and coordinating the stay, right? It's finding that if you're going to Miami those dates, that you have enough options and enough of a network to find what you're looking for, especially in those key cities, LA, New York, Miami, SF. And then from there, what we're planning on turning on, like why we're closing this round, is to say, when you're buying into these networks where you want to do this, these stays with anybody that's not your friend, anybody that's a friend of a friend, a group member, all of Kommu, that's where there are added sort of rules of engagement, where if you're paying on Kommu, the expectation is, you're not canceling as a host within a certain period of time. And if you are, we can essentially penalize you and or remove you from that pro platform and that pro plan. And as a guest, you're also locking in that stay, right? That host is opening that home for that much value. But if you bail at the last second, the opportunity cost is very high for that host that now doesn't have that $500. And so that's ultimately the goal, like in the next 3 to 6 months, to turn that on properly so that we can enforce that.
Got it. Okay. And then one of the things that might concern some people is the damages. So all of a sudden I go to Miami, I get drunk as usual, and I destroy a bunch of the property, which is what I normally do everywhere I go. And the guy gets a nice big bill. So now in the website, it says that I have to work that out with the owner. That just seems like, woof, as an owner, that would be like a can of worms. Like, oh my God, how am I going to go after this guy? Now, yes, I have my ID and that kind of stuff, but still, it's just, clawing back money is a tough business, even if you've got their ID and that kind of stuff. So how does that work out? Have you had any experience, not you personally, but on your platform, perhaps?
Yep. So we're approaching over nearly 300 bookings right now. We have not had a single incident to date. And a lot of that is because social networks and social proofing serve as a really, significant deterrent from people trashing each other's homes, right? I will say 99.99% of Airbnbs go off without a single incident. But when they do happen, we all hear about it in the news, obviously, in those horror stories.
Right.
We plan and believe we will be significantly better than that, partly because of the idea that like you lose social capital if you're a friend of a friend, for instance, and you go to somebody's place in Miami and you trash it. And beyond that, what we're planning on building, obviously, in this new iteration for the pro users is that protection plan, is those assurances of saying, hey, we're going to be able to regulate this market. We're going to remove any bad actors if that were to ever happen. And we're going to cover you as both as a host and a guest. In the host case, it's offering a protection plan that is essentially gap coverage over that renter's or homeowner's policy. But it's knowing that, like, God forbid that were to happen, which is incredibly rare, right? If that were to happen, we've got you covered and we will take care of that person not being able to book on Kommu in the future.
Okay. Now, Airbnb has a review system built in so that whenever you stay there, the guests have a review. So if you're a host on Airbnb, and let's say I don't know you, Bo, but you're requesting my stay, I can see, okay, Bo's stayed at 20 places and been a good guest. So therefore, there's that kind of social capital already built into Airbnb. Now, in Kommu, you have social capital built in through a friend of a friend network, but is that enough to distinguish itself from Airbnb? If I'm an Airbnb host, maybe what Airbnb tells me about the guest who's applying is good enough. And the fact that, Bo is a friend of my buddy John is maybe, about the same.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, like, there's two answers to this question that kind of go in different, directions. So one is like on the consumer side of what we're building. We do agree, like, one of the key things we need to put in place right about now is ratings and reviews, and possibly, like, we're really imagining more of a vouching system, right? So that idea that if you're booking somebody's place, seamlessly being able to reach out through those mutuals and sort of vouch for that, Francis is a good person that I would welcome into my home and vice versa, right? And obviously that idea that, like, if God forbid something were to happen, which is going to be incredibly rare, that we're managing and regulating that network to the point where we're removing any of these bad actors from ever booking on Kommu again. But that's like really like obviously what we're building towards. We do actually have short-term rental and Airbnb hosts that list on Kommu. And you'd be like, well, why are they that are making money in these great locations? Like, why are they listing on Kommu? And so they choose us as essentially a direct booking platform for when they cannot list their home on Airbnb, because there's more and more regulations preventing the amount of days they can list. And preventing essentially their profit margins. And it's also because once that relationship is bridged, like let's say you're an Airbnb host and you have a guest that you love that has been there a couple times, that you book on Airbnb obviously consistently because you have the air cover, plan to protect if anything were to happen to the home. Kommu then becomes this alternative booking platform where you can essentially list your home when it's available for direct booking to these repeat guests or to your friends and family as an alternative sort of source for when you can't list on Airbnb. And we've seen a lot of momentum there. And that's really to say, like, those direct bookings are happening all the time anyways without Kommu in existence, right? A lot of people bridge that relationship on a platform like an Airbnb. And the short-term rental platform is doing everything they can to say, hey, make sure you book it on Airbnb. Like, we got you covered. And then both sides are still frustrated a little bit with the fees in that system and how expensive it gets. And then even the regulations preventing those hosts from being able to make the money that they want to make on this investment property that they have. That's not our target market, but that's obviously, I'm just sort of using that as a use case of, it was a surprise to us that so many short-term rental hosts were even choosing us, because you would be like, oh, well, just go make money on Airbnb and be registered. That's a great, it's a great business for most of those hosts.
I know there's a bunch of regulations at a lot of cities, New York, San Francisco, et cetera. They have put some severe restrictions on these places for Airbnb. But Kommu, it's flying underneath the radar right now today. But if it got to be big, why wouldn't it just be subsumed with, the law encompasses Kommu too, right?
Yeah, I mean, I will say, like, it's kind of, first and foremost, not that this is how we necessarily think, but like you look at the history of these sort of disruptive networks, like even disrupting the disruptor of Airbnb, let's call it. I mean, that didn't stop Uber from disrupting the taxi cab industry with those ordinances in those cities like New York. That being said, we essentially used to be a home swapping platform. So this is a little bit back to the genesis and the origin story, but it speaks to the regulations. We were a home swapping platform called Swapped when we were in business school. And the idea would be you could swap homes. There's like a credit system. And that's because we discovered this website. Have you ever heard of homeexchange.com?
Yeah.
So I've never heard of it until that first problem came about. And I looked into it and I'm like, wait a second, like a home swap makes a lot of sense. Like this is not a transaction. It's not a sublet. I could do that. And if you just built this for young people, it's going to be a lot bigger than home exchange because home exchange is really a lot. Like it's 45 to 64-year-olds, mostly with families that don't necessarily have that need as much as those 24 to 35-year-olds do in these expensive cities. And so that's where we started. One of our competitors is definitely is doing well in that space. But we went through business school, like as we were learning about that and finding what was working and what was not. We actually entered into the largest pitch and business plan competition with the law school at UCLA. And we did significant digging into these ordinances. And we're like, hey, just checking LA, just checking New York, like we're good, right? There's a swap. We're just taking a small fee for facilitating that, but there's no, commercialization happening. There's no exchange of money. Everything's okay, right? And they were like, no, as long as you as a platform take a transaction fee, you are explicitly violating those ordinances based on the broad mandate of those ordinances, and you will be penalized. And it was $1,000 per night to the host platform and so on and so forth, which is why, by the way, Airbnb has to make sure that you're registered with these cities. Like the fines to a platform like Airbnb are substantial. That was where we were like, wait a second, if you looked at all the research that we had done throughout time, like to get to this point, to become like domain experts, there are massive Facebook groups, there are websites, there are people posting on Instagram, texting all day long that are facilitating sublets and facilitating these exchanges. And as we dug deeper, we're like, why are they not getting regulated? Why are they not subject to those regulations? And it really gets down to Section 230, which is essentially protecting internet providers, like internet publishers, I should say, from those ordinances. And that essentially says, look, as long as you don't take a transaction fee, people have a right to publish and market their homes when they're available, and then they have a right to fundamentally have people in their homes. And so we were like, okay, actually, by not taking a transaction fee, this is not only a regulatory opportunity, where there's a lot of us in the space, there's a lot of momentum, and that's exciting because that eventually at scale, when we do all hit scale, there will be regulations, but we're all going to be making our case for why we are not a short-term rental platform and why we're actually better and safer and better for those communities. But for us, we're like, not only is this the preferred way that people want to travel, but by eliminating the transaction fees and making sure that people are not listing their homes for profit, we are working essentially with these regulators to show that this does not have the same negative communal effect. And we're working with those landlords to say this is a tool of empowerment for these consumers like me that might not even be able to afford their rent if they don't have somebody that can go fill their home when they're away. And that's like really where we get into the broad long-term opportunity of saying like, yeah, we expect regulators to come and turn into us along with all the other competitors in the space that are emerging. And in New York, those ordinances essentially de facto banned Airbnb in New York. And what happened? Hotel prices skyrocketed. They just passed an average daily rate of $300 per night. And so the fight is to say consumers need alternative options. They need to have a variety of options to be booking. And especially those that have the greatest financial need, they deserve a platform and a safe place to list and share their homes, ideally with and through people they trust. And we want to make sure they're not listing for a profit. We don't agree that you should be able to like rent a home and do Airbnb arbitrage to make money. That has a totally negative impact on communities and housing supply. So that's really where there is a long-term fight, but we think we will be in the best position with those regulators to say, look, at the effect of Kommu, it's actually only empowering people without those negative effects of short-term rentals.
But I'm not understanding why you're saying you shouldn't make a profit. I mean, if I'm charging $100 a night for my one-bedroom apartment, isn't that a profit right there? Because it would normally be empty on my vacation to Thailand.
Well, it's really that your sunk cost is there. So it's to say like, you either now, like, let's call it the double rent problem, right? On the financial side of it. Like if I want to go to New York for a month, not only do I either have to afford, $300 a night at a hotel or theoretical Airbnb, so that's $9,000 of sunk costs just to be able to go to New York. On top of that, I have my place in LA that's $2,000 of sunk rent gone because I can't do anything to list and leverage my home. There's literally not an option for me. So that's an $11,000 trip versus what I just, said, where I'm happy to broadcast this to the regulators and the masses. I found a friend of a friend. I told my landlord about it too. He's very supportive of that. They know that I'm not running a business. I'm saying, hey, I have a friend of a friend staying in my place. They're paying me directly for my rent. I'm not charging a profit. And that's taking a tremendous financial burden off of me. And then I'm dog sitting, which is awesome because I'm just helping somebody else, a host that didn't want to put their dog in a kennel for $100 a night. And I get to stay at her place and hang out with this great dog. And that's again, another way of just leveraging both of our homes in a way that has only created a financial benefit without this idea of people trying to do all of this just to make as much money as humanly possible. And that is what Airbnb is fighting. I mean, like ultimately it's to say Pandora's box opened and human greed evolved to the point where, yeah, everybody wants to go buy 30 homes, list them on Airbnb, and make as much money as humanly possible. And Airbnb is trying everything they can to rein that in, but it's a little bit too late. And why would you? You're making $9 billion in revenue a year if you're Airbnb, and that's an amazing business. So like we're here for a different market, the primary home market, which is still in our instance, we believe it's offline.
But how does Kommu make money then?
So that's where we really believe it's like a Costco model. And so it's saying you're paying a small annual membership fee. We're making sure for the guest value, right? It's to say those are people now that are finding homes that are on average, again, in New York City, $80 per night. So they're significantly more cost effective on the booking side. And then on the host side, it's putting money into the pockets of people or putting value, whether that's swapping or dog sitting, whatever it might be, for people that have no other alternative option. And so either as a host or a guest, if you do 2 nights on Kommu per year, you make that money back and more, right? Most of our hosts and guests save $5,000 to $15,000 a year just by being on Kommu. And that's really like the opportunity. It's to say, since COVID, untethered demand, that means that people can now live and travel more frequently than ever before. It's the remote work, hybrid work sort of paradigm that we exist in right now. And so to service that demand, you come up with a subscription model for essentially unlimited stays where people are listing for anything but a profit, and you create a tremendous amount of consumer value. And that subscription model can scale to billions of dollars in revenue is what we believe for that core demographic of users that are not listing their homes on Airbnb.
Yeah, I understand. Now, Trusted House Sitters, which is a platform I use regularly, is about $150 a month roughly for their low-end membership. What is your projected fee going to be?
Yeah, by the way, correct me if I'm wrong. I thought Trusted House Sitters was about $150 a year, but maybe I'm wrong.
Did I say a month?
A month,
did I
yeah.
say a month? I'm sorry. You're right. Okay. It's a year. Yeah.
Them and Home Exchange, everybody else, it's about the same. It's about $150 to $300, and that's sort of where we're ballparking as well too. And we might even offer a monthly membership that's even cheaper, like a $20 option as well, because we believe people will stick and see the value once they come and check us out. But yeah, ultimately it's about that. It's probably $200, $300 a year on Kommu, but then we want to be the one platform that has all of these networks built into it. Like that's why we have a Trusted House Sitters and Pet Sitters group on Kommu. It's a sub network of the social based platform that we want to give you all of that value for one subscription price.
Okay. And so this fee that you pay is going to last for the entire year, and it's payable whether you are a guest or a host?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, so some people would say
similar to Trusted House Sitters.
Yeah, exactly. And it's to say, if you want to use Kommu, for instance, to share your home with your friends for free, that's a total use case for Kommu. And it also, as I think you alluded to on the website, we also are Find My Friends at the city level. So like even if you're going to Paris and you want to see who are your friends that live in Paris, who are going to be there at the same time, you can use Kommu in that way. And ultimately that is just to help you connect on any trip you take. But if you want to list your home to these wider networks of friends, of groups, of people listening to all of Kommu, you have to buy in on both sides of that marketplace where we put you through that vetting and that service, and we protect you on those stays. And from there, that's where we are essentially charging an annual membership to underwrite and protect the integrity of that network, those wider networks of everybody through your friends.
Okay, so if I use the free plan gives me access to know where are my friends and friends of friends for free, and I could presumably stay with them maybe for free, presumably, when I go to these cities. But if I wanted to go see the public offerings, then I have to pay the $300 a year.
Exactly. So it's not our primary use case, and that's why we pivoted to this open network to start. Is because some people do use Kommu in that way. It's this idea of like, if I have 10 friends and we're all moving and we're not sure where everybody's traveling or when they're traveling. My friend in New York, I'm normally based in LA. My friend in New York, if he's going to Paris, I love Paris. If he's going to Paris, he wouldn't normally text me in LA and say, hey, Bo, just a heads up, I'm going to be going to Paris. Like my place is available. By basically putting that all onto this platform where people are sharing their trips or they are updating that to kind of show their friends where they're traveling and get those recommendations, I'm now seeing proactively that I could be in New York for those dates. And because the paradigm shifted, I don't have to just have 14 days of vacation time from my, white collar job anymore. I can go live and work anywhere. I'm like, you know what? Maybe I will go work in New York for free for 2 weeks and see my friends that are out there because I went to college back east. And that's really that's the aspirational part that we want to bring out in every traveler of like, if you just saw all the places that you could be staying right in this moment in time, it is hundreds of places with and through. Just even having 10 friends connected on Kommu, when you open up that network, hundreds of places are available to you that you should be booking.
The one thing I'm still struggling to understand, Bo, you're very good at explaining everything, although I'm still stuck on one issue, and that is the issue of profit. And so you're saying that, the Airbnb people are more or less gouging and charging as much as they can. Any capitalist would do the same, but I don't understand why the Kommu people would do any differently.
Yeah.
That's what I'm
so
saying.
like I guess a good example is I have the most risk tolerance more than most Airbnb hosts that are people. Like let's remove the investment management companies. I wish I could list my home on Airbnb to like recoup just my rent, but it would be great to make a profit. To do so, and I've gone through Airbnb onboarding recently. It's an amazing product. At the end of that onboarding, there was like, did you register with the city of LA to get your permit to do this? And I was like, no, because I'm literally not allowed to. And so that is where we're saying, well, look, if you want to make a profit, those ordinances, they are a good thing. They are a protection against the greed of essentially all of us, right? Which is like, yeah, sometimes you want to buy a property and be a capitalist and make a profit. That's the short-term rental industry writ large. And that means that there's no solution for anybody to list their home in any other way, whether that's a swap or pet sitting, right? Or a sublet network. They all exist. They're disparate. They're not socially based, but some of them are great companies like Home Exchange and Trusted Pet Sitters. We want to bring that on to a social platform where we're saying, okay, well, whether it's a swap or dog sitting or even a cash sublet or not a profit, or even gifting to a friend, those should all be options available to you on one platform and for one annual fee. And that should prevent the commercialization that you see that created that greed in the short-term rental industry. And that's where we have to go in and use the data that we have and the data available to us, or the literal like lease that you need to upload for us to verify, to say, hey, Francis, if you're in New York and your rent's $3,000 a month, and we verified that with the sources that you've bought, allowed us to use, we're only going to let you ever put a dollar amount on your home for Kommu to list to other people for $100 a night, right? That's the nightly fee for $3,000 of rent. If you try to list it for $300 a night, go register with Airbnb and go make a profit, and that's okay.
Oh, wow. So let me see if I understood you correctly. Are you saying that you have to kind of prove to Kommu what your monthly housing costs are, whether it's a mortgage or whether it's a rental, and then you basically take that price divided by 30 days in a month, and that's the max that somebody can charge?
Yeah, and I will say, without revealing too much about that, like there's a lot of data sources and ways that we can get very close to, knowing what your rent and that actual payment is. But if, like, for instance, we were grossly misrepresenting that, and you were like, hey, Bo, it's not $3,000 a month, it's $4,500 a month, and you provided that lease to Kommu, we would then act accordingly and upload that, update that on your profile to allow you to increase what that listing price is. But that, honestly, without that quality control in place, especially when you're starting with an open network, you will evolve to Airbnb. That's the truth, right? If you don't have some sort of pricing control to prevent those public hosts from listing for a profit, they will inevitably just turn to you as this fee-free alternative of a short-term rental platform. And we just don't want to become that. To be able to try to do pet sitting and swapping and subletting and gifting, like those are a lot of different value props to a lot of different people. But at the end of the day, we're sort of saying people have a right to leverage their homes how they see fit, ideally with and through the people they trust. And that network has a lot of potential to empower people to travel more than ever before.
Still want to delve a little bit more into this nuts and bolts of how this thing works. So I've got a 1-bedroom place, and now anybody can forge a rental agreement and then just show it to Kommu. Here, that shows I pay a rent of $10,000 a month for my 1-bedroom. Now, I know you said earlier that we have ways to kind of do a sanity check on the numbers. So presumably you would say, wait, we know that you live in Nebraska. There's no way that you would spend $10,000 for a 1-bedroom in Nebraska. Is that right? Is that
yeah? And I will say, like, totally agree with you that if in that manual process, right, there's a definitely a risk for that. And there are ways that we address that with, like, there's the vendors that we're using that can actually prove to a pretty high degree that that's not the case, that your rent is not ridiculously high in Nebraska. But in the worst case scenario where we're making mishaps there and like we're missing that, the market actually works itself out where most people are listing their homes for cost, and they're the ones that are getting booked. Because why would I go book the person in Nebraska for $300 a night when there's plenty of people around available to me that are listing for $100 a night? Right now, we don't have that enforcement in place. We're just seeding the network, growing it. We have nearly 600 hosts all over the world. Like, we're trying to get to that point where now it's time to turn on the monetization piece. There are a couple of hosts in New York, I'm not going to name names, but they list their homes for like $300 a night because they are profit motivated. They're not getting booked, and we're using Kommu in that example to educate them, to say, like, look, here's what other people are listing for. Obviously, you're not really behaving in accordance with what we're building towards, and we don't want you to get booked for $300 a night. That is going to essentially dilute the value and the communal effect of what we're building. And then soon we'll be able to enforce that with the product.
Okay. But those guys who are charging $300 a night in New York City, they're the same guys who had to pay the $300 annual fee, right?
Once we turn that up, so that's where we're saying, hey, if you're paying a $300 annual fee, no problem. But let's say it's $300 a night. Sorry, $100 a night is they're probably closer to their real rent. You pay that fee. You do once a year. You do get a 3-day trip from Kommu, which most trips are going to be at least a week or two. You've made that back. So I remember when I was on Home Exchange, I think I was a member for 3 or 4 years because I did one trip to Jackson Hole, which I had a great time, which I could not have afforded without a Home Exchange. And I kept paying that annual membership for 3 or 4 years because I was like, I have a feeling I'm going to do that one trip, even though I didn't. But obviously, we're trying to create even more value by having even more homes and different ways of listing for both hosts and guests.
It sounds really innovative product you got, innovative app. Again, it's Kommu, Kommu. And Bo, I really admire anybody who goes into the travel space to do some entrepreneurial stuff. And you're applying your business school lessons every day, I'm sure.
Kind of. I mean, yeah, business school would say probably be more risk averse, but at the end of the day, you see an opportunity, you got to go learn and try and do it.
I'll put a link in the show notes. And I hope that if somebody's listening to this later on in 2024, go check it out on the Android app, but it's already available on the Apple iStore or whatever it's called. And iStore, you can tell I'm an Android guy.
I love Android. Trust me, it was an engineering decision that we made, not we prefer iPhone to Android users decision.
Totally makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense. Okay, great. Well, any last tips, advice for people as they think about joining Kommu?
No,
Network?
I mean, ultimately, right now it's free to use. The more friends you add, the better your value is as both a host and a guest. But ultimately, you can follow Kommu on our socials. It's at GoKommu in most instances, and you can feel free to DM me on the platform if you have any feedback or questions or concerns. And we're just really thankful for, you hosting us and giving us a chance to talk about Kommu. And we're really thankful for our users that check us out and, let us know what you think.
And that ends this episode of the WanderLearn podcast, where we explore travel, technology, and transformation. If you'd like to see the show notes with links to what we've talked about, go to wanderlearn.com and click on this episode. If you'd like to connect with me, just remember Tapon. That's my first initial and my last name. Tapon is always my social media username. My website is ftapon.com. Do you want to leave me an anonymous voicemail where you can make a comment or ask a question? Then go to speakpipe.com/ftapon. Furthermore, if you'd like to get rewarded for supporting my projects, then go to patreon.com/ftapon. That's where you can pick up some remarkable rewards for as little as $2 a month. Now, 5 quick favors. Number 1, subscribe to the WanderLearn podcast. 2, download it. 3, share it. 4, review it. And 5, sign up for my newsletter at wanderlearn.com. Our theme music was composed by Eric Stratman. This is Francis Tapon, encouraging you to wander and learn.